need to observe good governance and integrity. That is both in the sense that of the system itself, but also the culture, and also having a high degree of zero tolerance of corruption. So unless we have that, if not, we cannot move up the scale to the higher level of income, because purely things will not be efficiently done. There will be a distortion of the economy in the sense that things that should be implemented according to good principles or objectively, but were distorted because somewhere along the line it was clouded by corruption and abuse of power, right? So we can never make a optimum decision for the good of the country when there's corruption inside. So therefore, that comes to my mission, is that my mission has to be very holistic. It's not the issue of fighting corruption alone. It's an issue of bringing Malaysia to a state that is able to achieve the high income model. So my mission is actually a corrupt-free Malaysia with a high standard of living, having a sustainable growth, and with a just and equitable society living in peace and harmony. So it's holistic. So I want to see corruption in this context. It's not just about catching people or what you call having a nice and good system. Okay. And secondly, as a minister, I come in and have that mission that I have. And my mission is very, very clear. Has to be aligned with my vision, and is to help transform the nation to a corrupt-free society, bringing Malaysia to be one of the top 30 countries in the world in accordance with TICPI index ranking, with a rating of 70 out of 100. So this is very much higher than what the GDP2 or what nkra has. But then that is a vision for me as a minister, and I hope that my team will share that vision. Of course, the GDP2 and all that are phases. There may be GPT3, GD4, GD5, but the long-term vision is I want to see the country to be one of the top 30s, top 30s in the world. Okay. So that's a tall order. But mission usually is a tall order. Yes. Okay. So the second question is, do we want me to continue, or do you have any more questions on the first part?
The one thing with one question I have, Dato, is that your present portfolio for governance and integrity is something that is very new in the government. As far as I know, I'm not sure, but as far as I know, it's something that's also new in a lot of other countries as well, probably.
Yeah.
In which case, where do you draw your benchmark, your parameters then?
To be frank, I don't see any other countries or any nation has such a ministry or such a minister in such a portfolio. So Malaysia is probably the only one, maybe one and only one. Yes. Maybe in future people will follow our model to have such a minister in charge of that. And I think that it's important to understand how my ministry is being created, in the sense that it shows that first thing is that the Prime Minister himself has the political will to tackle the issue of governance and integrity and corruption, right? And secondly is that these issues cut across every ministry. When we talk about governance, integrity and corruption, it's not just about one single transaction, one single ministry. It cuts across every ministry horizontally and vertically. It cuts across every aspect of society. Every aspect of society, because people will react to the frontline desks of government and everything, and if there are bad governance, then corruption is there. Okay, so, and I think several things become very clear. One is that the last two general elections, the GE12 and GE13 especially, survey has been made, and you can see from the media, the expression of people. Two things are very clear, what the people want. They want less corruption. They feel that government should do something about it. And secondly is they want social justice. And always in the area of corruption, there's always an element of social justice.
Yes.
Because corruption perverts social justice. And usually perverts social justice for the benefit of the few. So usually it's the poor who's going to suffer. All right. So the point is for Malaysia is that we have reached a stage where people awareness is very strong, and they are not just aware of corruption, they are beginning to have a high intolerance of corruption, and they are prepared to translate that high intolerance into action. When you say action, it becomes from passive to active. I think many people do talk about corruption, but it's a passive type of talk. That means when you are asked whether you want to do something about it, they say no. They know it is wrong, but they are not prepared to put their head or their hands or their feet or their money, so to speak, or their resources to fight corruption. So, but I think in the case of Malaysia, I can see that the awareness is so strong that they are prepared to translate it into votes.
Yes.
Into votes. So, from that angle, I believe that no government can survive unless they tackle these issues head on. And in our case, I suppose we can say this thing will become more pronounced, the issue of corruption, social justice will become more pronounced as issues that coming from the GE14.
Yep.
So we have this 5-year period for the government in power to do something about it. And so I believe because of this, that the Prime Minister felt that there is need for an outside person or something to bring change along those lines. And hence this is how I believe that my ministry is being created. And secondly is this, the unusual part, if I can say, is this, and I'm invited in as a federal minister.
Yes.
All right. I mean, why not as a consultant or a deputy minister or a governance or integrity advisor? I mean, all those positions are available. To bring someone from outside as a cabinet minister, as you know, it's a brave and radical decision, right? But I can see the point of view of the Prime Minister, because to do these things, first thing is that the minister must have the stature, the minister must have the means to establish relationship with other cabinet ministers as well. You know, you can't be a consultant and
Yes.
able to talk to all ministers, right? So it brings me to a position where I am a colleague of fellow ministers, and I bring an agenda of governance and integrity, which I believe is often the missing piece of change in many ministries. I think you can change so many things in ministry, but this change towards better governance and integrity, someone needs to drive it, and someone needs to help all the other ministries and all the other ministers. So therefore, appointing me as a cabinet minister give me that position, and I suppose if I can say that avenue of influence on other ministries as well. Of course, with the support of the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Datuk, you are a minister in the Prime Minister's department. Just wondering, how does that work? I mean, why are you?
I'm Minister and Prime Minister in Parliament, specialized government integrity and anti-corruption, and of course human rights. So human rights was not something that I expected when I came in, but it was landed upon me purely because also the issue of when we want to fight corruption or deal with social justice, we cannot do it in isolation. So the government must empathize with the people. And the way you empathize with the people and understand their needs is you must have constant reaction, interaction, and relationship with the people, including the civil society organization, NGOs, and so forth. So it's also one of my job to connect to the people and to talk to them. And that's why I'm very open to NGOs. And you can see that the way I handle the Hendran's case, although it's out of here, but it does shows that my approach, in a sense that brings the government closer to the people and to react with them. And of course, I have to deal it both in a way of using the social media, as well as face-to-face interaction, as well as ground visit, if I can. Yeah. So that's the way, and that's the reason for my portfolio. Yeah.
Some people might wonder, why do you not have why is there not a special, not a special department, a separate department, like Home Affairs or something like that for
okay, put it this way, I'm not a operating ministry, if I can describe it. That means like you are minister for health or transport and all that. That's because the nature of my mission. Nature of my mission. That one is best handled by the other minister. My ministry is actually a ministry of change. A ministry of change. Yeah. And I suppose you can say that the other ministry of change is Pemandu. Right? So I work very closely with Pemandu, and we complement each other, and I do use their staff. But as a minister, coming from TI, coming from experience outside, I'm more interested on execution. That means it's not about rhetoric, it's not about cosmetic changes. I want to make sure that things are implemented, and accountable. Yeah.
Talk about Dato', considering that you were president of TI for 5 years, TIM for 5 years, and considering the time you and the organization had made quite a number of statements regarding corruption, and then now you actually have the chance to do something about it. But since you become minister, do you see that has your perceptions of things changed? Do you see that certain things that you might have wanted before might not be able to be executed owing to certain barriers or things like that?
Okay. All right, I need to be very clear here. When I was the president of TI, and I represent both the local chapter of a very world-renowned NGO that has specialized in fighting corruption. So I come from a NGO background, and of course, as that background, I gain a lot of knowledge about what corruption is, how to deal with it, and this also gave me a worldwide view of development of corruption and how corruption affects the people and so forth. Now, being an NGO and being a president of TI Malaysia, I have the duty to speak what I believe is wrong with government.
Yes.
I have duty to speak what is wrong with government, and often when I speak from that angle, I don't have information about the reality of the situation.
Yes.
Neither do I want to compromise it. Okay, I cannot say, oh, because you are like that, so you cannot implement. So my stand is like that. I cannot, because as an NGO, I have to speak almost to perfection sometimes, because the principles we don't compromise. So I'm able to speak from that angle. But when I become a minister in the government, I'm also part of the cabinet, and so whether people see it or not, but I become part of the government itself, the part of the government. And when I become part of the government, it's also an integrity issue that I have to abide by certain rules of the government. I cannot be, okay, if I can use the word, I cannot be a loose cannon in government, all right? I cannot be a loose cannon.
Yes.
I say what I like, do what I like, and continue to be like an NGO minister, if you like. I cannot be like that. I have to respect cabinet decisions. I have to do things through persuasion. I have to do things through influence. And I have to understand the political realities of things. And I have to also understand the limitations of laws and institutions. But that doesn't mean I compromise my ideal standard.
Definitely.
It's just that some things may not be, I may not be able to implement right now.
Yes.
But maybe it can be implemented in 10 years time. I don't know, maybe it's some also not even in my lifetime, I don't know. But the point is, I begin to map out the steps towards the ideal if I can. Of course, in my TI, as president of TI, I often say that the company should aim for zero corruption, right? Because to me, a corrupt-free society is the only thing acceptable to a TI as president. But when I come into the government, you say to me, oh, you compromise your view. Now you say one of the top 30, 70 or 100, right?
It's realistic.
Of course, to me, that's already a high target.
Yes.
But of course, I know the ideal, right? But the ideal actually doesn't exist anywhere of the world, right? But it's easy for me as a TI NGO president to say it, because this is what I should say, you know? So, but when I come in, I still set a high standard. But also, if I can, also I aim for zero corruption, of course. Okay. So this is my position. Yeah. So often I've been accused of, for example, that what I say outside is different from what I say inside. That's because my responsibility changes.
Yes, of course.
Outside I has a different responsibility, probably very little accountability. But when I come inside, I'm accountable to the government. I may not be elected, but I'm accountable to the ideals of the government. Yeah.
You have to abide by the cabinet unity.
At the moment, also the way things are being done, you know, things are being done, you know. Already, for example, already that something that I did was, I suppose, because I'm apolitical, already I'm taking the position that, for example, I don't think the cabinet restricts me from talking to any opposition party, right? Or PR lah. Now these days very hard to say who is in opposition, who is not, depending on what state you are in.
Yes.
But as far as I'm concerned, dealing with the issue of corruption, governance and integrity transcends across political boundaries, right? So I have no problem shaking hands with Tan Sri Khalid, for example, in a recent seminar. I have no problem being invited as a keynote speaker, you know. And I think also they knew where I'm coming from. They also have no problem inviting me. I mean, they could have invited another more prominent PR keynote speaker, you know, like their leader, for example. But they chose me. All right. So it's a new culture that I have, and I believe that for certain issues of human rights, social justice, and what benefit the people, we should cross political boundaries.
Definitely.
Now, then it's easier for me to do this than my political political colleague.
Yes.
Because for them, if they do that, they may be seen as compromising their political stand.
Yes.
But if I do that, I'm not seen as compromising my political stand because I don't have one.
You don't have a party.
I don't have a party. My party is the People's Party, like, if you like, the Rakyat. And the Rakyat Party means, as far as I'm concerned, if it's the interest of the people, I cross political boundary. Who cares about political views?
So very good. I think mom is just like you, because
Yeah.
ultimately it's
Yeah.
our country. You see. It's
Yeah. But for politics to reach that level, I'm not saying that they cannot do it, but it reached the level of political maturity to do it.
Yes.
Okay, and when I say that, I'm being criticized by some politicians, saying that I'm labeling them as not matured. It's not. I'm not saying that they are childish or anything. It's just that our political system at the moment is not politically matured enough for politicians with political affiliation to cross boundaries. For example, they cannot vote anything that the party is against any party.
Do it right.
The whip, right? For example. But in America and other countries, you can cross the floor and vote for something that you feel that you don't agree. All right? So you can be bipartisan. All right? So this is what I'm saying. We have not reached that level. to be able to cross the political divide for other issues. But as far as governance and integrity concerned, I can cross all issues.
I see.
Okay.
So, by the way, don't mind me asking, as a senator in the Senate, are you bound by the whip as well?
In a sense, there is a whip. I'm bound by the whip. As I say that to a certain degree, I have to conform. But it depends on the issue. Depends on the issue. Especially it's an issue of conscience. Then I may want to speak out. You know, I cannot be bound by something that bring detriment to a society or to a group, right? Come on. You cannot expect me to represent integrity and governance and then condone something that is unrighteous, right?
Yeah.
It cannot be doing something that is inconsistent, you know. So to me, it depends on what issue. Yeah.
One of the sectors in which people have said that corruption is either rife or really needs tackling is the public sector. Since you have become the minister, I think for more than a month already, have you met with the civil service leaders like the KSN, the PSC chief? How has your meetings with them been on tackling corruption in the public sector?
Okay. Basically, I want all of us to understand that corruption is not just something of the public sector.
Definitely, yes.
It has also to do with the private sector, the giver and the taker.
Yes.
There is, but the public sector is being focused much more purely because they are supposed to be the civil service, or we have civil servants, if you like,
Yes.
says, because they are supposed to serve the public, delivering public goods. And basically they are custodian of how we spend the money from the taxpayer. So the demand from them obviously comes on them purely because they are the government. They are the government. Okay. Now, first thing is this. If I can put it this way. In the government, there is the executive branch, that is the prime minister, yes. The minister, and then I suppose there is the politician, the legislative branch, the politician. Then there is the civil servants, who is supposed to deliver what the parliament decide or what the cabinet or minister decide. Okay. So I think the issue is the fighting corruption. While there is strong political will, it cannot be depending on just the prime minister, cabinet ministers. So it has to go to parliament. All politician has to abide by the issues of integrity and governance, and then it has to go through the civil servants itself, and right down to, I suppose, town councils, frontline desks, and every individual that is called a civil servant. So that link has to be there. Unfortunately, I think this is one of the weak point in fighting corruption in the civil service, right? First thing is, of course, while the top may be willing, down the line, while they say they are willing, but they do something else. Yes. Purely because it is driven by a different type of agenda, right? And that's why you see often the inconsistency that comes up between prime minister and, I suppose, and minister, and minister and civil servants, the inconsistency. So my challenge now is, I think that first thing is the same culture must exist. Cannot be 3 or 4 different culture, and the same passion to fight corruption must exist at all level, at all level, and therefore it's my challenge, and I hope it's the challenge of every minister, to make sure that while they are committed to fight corruption and promote governance and good governance and integrity, is to ensure that their KSU, their Director General, everything subscribe to the same mission that they have. And once they have that, everybody must walk the talk. I cannot be doing something inconsistent with that mission, or even inconsistent with the minister's decision or desire to do that. And I presume that all ministers will do something that is of good integrity, and good governance, right? So the challenge is basically to make sure the consistency of walking the talk from the top to the bottom until it benefits the people.
Yes.
Right? So that's the challenge. And to do that, it's a big challenge because you need to strengthen both the preventive measures. By that, what I mean is the way you do procurement, the way you decide, the accountability system, the internal control system, the way you take corrective actions that comes from the Auditor's General report, the way you restructure processes, the way you train people, and all that, and also the way you enforce. Enforce means you need good institution to enforce. No nonsense, including if you are talking about the government side, the way you reprimand the abusers. It cannot be. You must make it known that they cannot hide behind impunity, and neither can they blame somebody else. If I sign a check that facilitate the corruption, it is me that's signing the check or approving that order. I take responsibility, and I cannot say that somebody gave me the instruction or I was pressured to do so. Right? All right. So that sort of culture must begin to exist in government, and the enforcement side, of course, has to be strictly enforced. So the issue of how abusers are being dealt with in proportion to the abuse that they make. If someone were to be corrupt, taking a 1 million, cannot be treated the same as someone that take a $50 bribe. Yes. Right? So including, I believe that you got to remove the security of tenure for that person that commits grave corruption. That means they can be sacked from the ministry. So maybe this is a cultural change, but
it's cultural change.
A great cultural change, but it demands that, and I think people who are honest, who do a good job and all that, I don't think they need to fear about facing this. It's only the bad apples that should be concerned about it, and you want to get rid of the bad apples really if they don't reform, and if they are not sorry for what they did or try to change. So that's the type of thing, I think, the challenge that we have to make.
Because I understand at the moment you have to go through the PSC disciplinary commission first.
Yeah. So they will also have to, I believe, in time to come, really change their views of what it is.
That's going to take, sorry, Doctor, I mean, like, to do something like that, would come under a lot of resistance. I mean, especially I think from people who are so used to the current system. I mean, do you envision that you'll be able to achieve this in, say, at the most you have 5 years as a minister? Do you think you'll be able to achieve this?
I'm very simple. First thing is you need radical change. And the hardest to change is the people attitude and the culture change. But you have to start somewhere, and you can't have a system that tolerates corruption, and you can't have a system that doesn't punish the guilty in proportionate to the crime. Okay. Otherwise, it will be a system that nobody consider fighting corruption as seriously. Okay, so I think this is some of the key issues that the government will have to make, and the civil servants themselves will make, because otherwise they will get a bad name as far as the public is concerned. So, and the main thing is the public are demanding. All right, and anything that is done badly, even by the civil servants, with or without the knowledge of the government, it will be the government that gets the blame.
Yes.
And it will be ultimately the Prime Minister will get the blame. All right? You can't say one thing at the top and another thing is not done at the bottom. So this disparity of gap is a challenge that we got to make the gap smaller. Yeah. But at the end, the people are demanding it. People are demanding and expecting civil servants also to walk the talk. Yeah.
And I suppose this actually also pushes the ministers to be more concerned, more serious about corruption, because I think there's an old saying that if a civil servant messes up, the minister is the one that gets punished.
Well, I suppose it can be both good and true. I mean, it can both sides. You know, I mean, there are also instances where, as I say, civil servants may not obey.
Yes.
Even the minister with good intention
Yes.
for implementing, but if there are loopholes, I mean, civil servants also can deviate and get the benefits for themselves, right? Yeah, so I think it's not just the ministers alone, you know. I think we have to look at all sides.
Oh yeah.
Of course, the ministers themselves will have to take the lead. Will have to take the lead because they are the head of their ministry, and that's why one of the approach that I'm trying to promote is to bring the change to ministry by ministry, with the involvement of the minister and especially the KSU themselves, because I don't think that we can change things from the outside, in the sense that from someone coming outside and telling them the ministry how to change. The ownership of all the measures that is to be taken has to rest with the minister and the KSU actually.
Yes.
You know, so but as far as my team and my ministry is concerned, we are there to support them. We are there to provide them a clear path of how to deal with issues of corruption, good governance. We are like the experts, you know, coming to help them, and we are prepared to sit alongside with any of their staff to implement it. But ultimately, the responsibility of the initiative will have to rest with the minister and especially the KSU. Minister can change, but the civil servants and with the KSU and the DG there will have to take the initiative and really drive it into the system in their own ministry.
Maybe that I think you've noticed I'm not actually asking you questions from the list already, because I think you've already given us the answers
Quite a lot,
here.
yeah.
So now actually, since we're done with the public sector, because now the private sector, I mean, there's not a lot of concentration on. I mean, it exists. We know it exists, corruption in the private sector. Within the private sector to public sector corruption exists, but somehow I think people see that there is not a lot of focus or rather talk about private sector corruption.
Okay, when I was TI president, and because I came from the private sector background, I have this concern that we need to deal with private sector corruption in two ways. One is their relationship with government, their relationship with politics, and their relationship with the business community themselves, among themselves. Okay, but since we talk so much about public sector, which we need to deal with the private sector as well. Especially, I'm not talking about individuals. Of course, fighting corruption has to do with individuals, but individuals will deal with what we call petty corruption, you know. But I'm more interested in dealing with the corporations, people who does business with the government. So how do I change that? How do I change that? It's true, Malaysia went through a period of re-examining ourselves coming from 1996-1997 crisis, and it was an issue of governance at that time. So we actually came up with a lot of rules of governance, and we have very good rules. The stock exchange, the SEC, all made requirements, regulatory requirements of that. Yeah? But I believe that all those are, while they made requirements, but there are a lot of statements that are being put in by public companies of how they tackle governance. But I believe that the real issue of change within the private sector is very minimum. It's not there. And I must say that because I have to distinguish between a multinationals and a local company. A multinational obviously has changed purely because they are governed by their strict laws in their own country, which has extraterritorial jurisdiction. That means a UK company cannot bribe in Malaysia and get away in UK, you know? So they already have that, and they are forced to have good governance as well as anti-corruption, anti-bribery policy. But for Malaysia, unfortunately, that we don't have that. We don't have that. So today, the attitudes of many companies, one is that they believe that bribery or corrupt practices is part of the competitive weapon. They see that as a strategy to obtain a sale rather than an economic crime. But of course, the law says it's an economic crime, and the public says that it's a crime against the public. But they see it as a competitive weapon, all right? And that's because the system establishes that practice as being okay, you know? And if it is okay, if everybody does it, why can't I do it,
Yes.
right? And when you ask the private sector whether you are prepared to stop corrupt practices, the first thing they'll answer you is that first thing is you have a clean civil service first, and secondly, you make sure my competitor stop that first before he comes to me, right? Because they see that if they stop, they'll be disadvantaged, and there will be no level playing field. Okay, so so you'll find that there is very strong inertia that is lacking in the private sector, because nobody wants to take the first move, because they think that those who took the first move will be disadvantaged, and they are not prepared to bear the cost of that sacrifice. All right. So to me as a minister, and coming from both sides, knowing experienced private sector and all that, we need to create something that has a strong ripple effect, you know, a strong ripple effect. And that ripple effect means that you got to do something that to bring everybody on board. So some of the things that we need to do, for example, is I'm all for having a corporate liability law against corruption. That means, of course, preferably you have the regulator coming on board to do it, you know, even though you don't have a law, you have administrative procedure like KL Bursa or Security Exchange. But I think the regulators there may say that, wow, you are imposing too many laws on them already of compliance, all right? But I think that like Bursa actually in their sustainability program, they have actually issues about sustainability means having anti-corruption policy in the company, but the enforcement may not be as strict. So you need a law, a corporate liability law, and today what's happening is if an employee bribe, even under the instruction of a CEO, or even though the board knows about it, if the employee is caught, it's the employee who is going to bear the brunt. I think the CEO is not going to say, I instruct it, or I condone it, or, you know, the CEO is going to say, look, we have a good code of ethics. It says we prohibit bribery, right? But on the other hand, there is in the background, all right, there is an informal decision that is made to say you try to get the sales by means of by a crook, you know. But if it's caught, the employee will be the one who bear the brunt, because he's the one who gave the money, he's the one who did everything, and the company will just deny it, right? And the company may even sack that employee, right? So in a sense, I feel that it is not fair, right? And many of them, I'm not saying the employees themselves may not do things according to their own wishes, they can, but I think if the company has a culture condoning such practices, then they are more likely to do it, right? So the issue is, how can you make the company, the board of directors and CEO responsible for action of their employee? And the only way today under our laws that is missing. In other countries, when an employee bribe, the countries get fined, and the board is held accountable. So we don't have that. That's why you always see, for a bribery case here, it's always the employee who get penalized. So you got to plug this loophole. Therefore, you have to come up with a anti-corruption liability law that put also the onus of proof on the company, the board of directors, and the CEO.
There's almost something like what the
UK
CIP,
Act.
The CIP actually does, but CIP is of course like voluntary. There's no enforcement there.
The way the CIP works is that basically CIP is only, people must appreciate that CIP actually is a big step to a completely several other steps that is needed. Because what the CIP does is, first thing is, it bring to the public the focus on issue of corporate integrity.
Yeah.
And the best way to bring to the public is to have public coming up forward to declare to the public, this is what I'm going to do. And if you look at the conditions and terms of the CIP declaration, it's quite comprehensive, including reporting your cases corruption to the MACC. But the issue is whether they does that or not is another issue. So that's a challenge. But that doesn't mean CIP is not a good instrument. It is. You know, in the past you don't have any public any company declaring anything about fighting corruption, right?
It's not enforceable, is it?
No, it's not enforceable. It's not enforceable. So you have that. So the other area is, apart from law now, as I say, corporate law, how do I move the private sector? So to move the private sector, we must reward good behavior. So all government contracts must begin to enforce, if you like, or to demand good governance. Good governance, all right? So that's where the other instruments of integrity pact, and signing and everything. And if I have my way, I would like to see government tenders only given to people who have signed the CIP as a first step. As a first step.
Can I quote that on you?
Yeah, you can quote that on me. You can quote that on me. Because if you can't even make a declaration, public declaration that you are going to have a clean company, I mean, why should I do business to you? You know? So I think government has the means to do it. But of course, people don't like anything that is forced upon them. But if you want quick change, drastic change, then certain amount of enforcement is necessary. And the government has the means of doing it. And you don't need to pass laws. You can do it administratively. You just say, okay, before you guys who are registered to me to have construction project, this is what I'm going to do. In 1 year's time, when you start to tender from our job in my ministry, I expect you, one of the criteria for pre-qualification is signing the CIP. And you better prepare now. Okay? So it can be done. And once you do that, believe me, the private sector will completely change. Completely change, because governance and fighting corruption become the forefront of the policy. And now you change of anti-bribery policy instead of being disadvantaged, now become an advantage. Right? Because your buyer, your customer requires it and demands it. Today, if you supply anything to a multinational, this is what they demand of you. If not, you are not on their list. Because why? Because they don't want your action to get them into trouble with their laws in their country. So multinationals are already in that mode. But here, we are still not, somehow, we think it's still impolite. Actually, it's not issue of polite or not polite. The stake is basically, how do you want to have radical change? So no need GDP 2, GDP 3. You just do this one thing. Believe me, I think the private sector will change.
Interesting enough, because I think for the MSCs, right, there's a stigma, even if they were not responsible for what their contractors or suppliers do, there's still stigma of being associated with them. And talking of which, Dato', would you think it is fair to say that in Malaysia, there seems to be less of a stigma about giving than taking?
Yes, because
there's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, you know why? Also, to be fair to the public sector, often when the private sector initiate the gift, they're not going to say that they are the one initiating the giving. They'll say that the civil sector, public sector is corrupt, they ask for it, and what can I do? I am just a poor businessman, I just have to meet it, if not, I cannot survive. I mean, that may be true, but not all transactions are initiated by the public sector. The private sector themselves also initiate it. Because, as I say, they don't see it as a crime, they see it as a competitive strategy or weapon. And
I think some time ago, I can't remember when, there was a survey done with Malaysian youth, students, and a large majority of them said that it is okay to offer a bribe. I think you remember that one or not?
Yeah, I think this is unfortunate, because the youth is going to be the professionals and the civil service in future, the CEOs, and some of them may be our political leaders in our society. So if they have that, I think we will have problems for our country. We have problem country. That means we are not going to get righteous people coming into management, coming into power, and especially people who grandiose corruption. That means they become hero because they are able to get a deal to corruption. You know, I mean, they don't say it, but our society may do it. So I think our problem is that they do not see many role models in our society. You know, I'm talking about role models. You know, so that culture really need to change. And I think if you can ask a lot of these youths and new graduates, they probably will boast about it. That if they get a deal done through unrighteous means, the end result justifies the means. Yeah? And they are not prepared to make a personal sacrifice, to make a stand that I'm not going to do anything that is corrupt, right? Right?
But it's actually quite interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, like, you have these people. I mean, I don't know them, of course, but I expect that when it comes to taking a bribe, you know, maybe a lot of them would say that's wrong. Because I mean, like, I've heard people, you know, complain about, you know, having to pay private things and that. But when it comes to giving a bribe, yeah, okay, how do you stop the idea? How can you, as the ministers, you know, bring about a change to stop this idea that it is okay to give? Because it's definitely not okay to give. But we all here, you know, so many of us think that giving is okay. Like, it's taking. See, those people who take a bad, you know, but we're not bad at all. We just give.
I think some of it are basically cultural issues as well. We are talking about giving as something forging a relationship, you know. And I think in Eastern culture, I think Malaysian culture also, the issue of relationship forming is part of very much our culture, and we include gifts and everything. So I'm not condoning. I'm not saying gifts are bad, but there's a difference between giving $50 and $1 million. Okay. You know, so where do you draw the line? But at the end of the thing, at the end of any action, is we have to ask the motive of what we do. Yes. Right. So every individual will have to be governed by a conscience, and precisely what sort of conscience are we putting into our employees and our young and our children? What sort of conscience that we are giving to them? So I think the conscience, this is rather a long-term thing, but it needs to be dealt with. So the issue of how do we understand integrity is, I mean, if you ask everyone what integrity is, I think everybody will give you a different opinion, right? Sure. But at the same time, nobody wants to say that they are not a man or woman of integrity, because to say that, what it means that you are untrustworthy, you are unreliable, you are dishonest, you cheat, you everything. And nobody is going to be happy. But on the other hand, they may do all those things and doesn't think that they violate any integrity principle. So it's very important for us to understand what integrity is. My own definition of integrity is, I try to define is to do the right thing, right? When people are not watching. Yes. Many people can be righteous only when someone is watching, and when they know that they are not going to be caught, right? Yeah. Of course, if they have a strong religious values that they know, believe in God, then they know God is watching you all the time. Maybe that will hold them from bribing. But even that, whether they know the consequence or not, you know. So in the sense that religious values does play a part. I'm not saying that that it doesn't. But and then the second part is this: many people can say, okay, nobody is watching, and people are watching, or nobody watching, I do the right thing. But the issue is this: you must do the right thing regardless of the circumstances, right? Because you know why? Because to many people, okay, if I can make a distinction, explain this. To many people, integrity and righteousness is a preference. Preference means it's okay as long as it doesn't cost me anything, right? Doesn't cost me to lose a sale. I'll be very good. I will pay a bribe. It doesn't cost me if there's peer pressure, you know, whether they are able to stand on peer pressure. Yeah? When it's a preference, if your peers pressure you, you break, and you also comply. or you go practice corrupt practices. You got, your boss asks you to bribe, and you say, okay, my boss, I'm makan gaji only, so I bribe lah. But you know it's wrong, right?
Yes.
So are you able to stand up to your boss and say, sorry sir, I'm not someone who want to do something according to your instruction, even I lose my job?
That's very hard for a lot of people.
Okay, very hard. But it comes from a conviction of the heart.
Yes.
So the difference is between preference and a conviction. You know, someone may say that, oh, I'm not going to take any bribe. Okay? So when someone offered a bribe of 10,000 ringgit, he said, no, I'm not going to take a bribe. You know, I'm a righteous man, a trustworthy man. Then suddenly that 10,000 is put up to $1 million. What happened? Then he said, okay, in this case it's different. Right? So he breaks down. You know, he's not prepared to stand on the principle,
Yes.
but is being pressured by the attractiveness, right, of the bride. So the issue is, if you have a conviction, whether people see it or people don't see it, whether regardless of circumstances, you stand and do what is right. That is what I define by integrity. Now the second part is dealing with issue of integrity. It's very much easy to say that you have this conviction, right? But not many people can be convicted in their heart. So you have to deal with a modern society. For Malaysia, we're facing the same thing. As we move to a high income model with advertising, social media, globalization, and all sort of sophisticated marketing, our values, our expectation of what is a comfortable life changes. All right, we believe we should have first thing what our neighbor have. You know, so the issue of materialism comes in, and when you go to a high economic model, always the issue is of material comes in, and what you define by happiness. You know, you'll be surprised that a person who has living in a third world country may be more happy than someone in a developed country, because the expectation, especially of material wealth, is different.
Yes.
And many status are measured by the wealth, material things, right? So how do we handle this materialism? I'm not saying that we are all hermits. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that unbridled materialism is bad. That means there's no control of acquisition of wealth by hook or by crook. That is bad. So the issue of greed comes in. Greed comes in. So these are real issues that has to be dealt with in our society. Yeah. Now, as a minister, it's very hard for me to deal with these issues because it covers both in education, in families, values, in the way the society thinks, you know.
Yeah.
All right. But these are the things that institutions that's under me, like IIM, can do it. IIM can do it. But at the moment, we have to see how to do it.
Wait, that's interesting enough. You, sorry, one other thing is that in schools in Malaysia we have moral education, right? Do you think that something like integrity education or anti-corruption education would be of any use? Or
Okay, the best place for moral education is not at the school.
yes,
It's actually start from the family, because the first example, that role model you have will be from the father and mother, especially the father, because the father is the how shall I say, the head of the household, head of the family, you know. And I hope the mother will take the cue from the father as well, you know. But the father sets the tone in the family, so it's for the father and the parents to teach the children first thing how not to lie, how to face up with the truth, how to take responsibility, and I suppose failures is not all that bad. You know, because integrity covers more than just money.
yeah,
It's also a meeting that what you did wrong is wrong, taking responsibility for it, and also try to do corrective action and change. So that's part of integrity. So it has to be rather holistic. Has to be holistic. So, and that comes from family. Because if you don't have that, if that person becomes the chief executive, he will blame the society, blame everybody else except himself. Although he took the bribe, you know. So he doesn't take responsibility and he doesn't change. And thirdly is that when you have family involved, what you're actually doing is you're shaping and molding, and you're telling the children that character is also important, right? You cannot simply any character. Character is not molded by the world, although the world take a strong influence. I mean, if the world mold your character, you will be a man of no character, because they're giving you all sorts of unrealistic demand. What means success is basically the world will tell you is just because you have more money, right? Right? So you're not going to build character of integrity if you just depend on the world. So the children, and then the school must come in. The role model of the teachers, the peer pressure must be there. You know, if other kids that it's all right to bribe, then you, after a while, you think it's all right. It's all right because why? Because your colleagues say so, right? So you got to change all that, and the teachers will be will have to play a greater role, and other kids also will have to play a greater role. Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, corruption isn't, or bribery isn't just about money, is it?
Corruption is not about bribery. If you look at the TI definition of corruption, is this, is that it's just basically defined as an abuse of power, entrusted power, for personal gain. There may not be any money involved, but everybody is given power, right? Everybody is given power. You are a teacher, you're given power by the government. If you are a cabinet minister or politician, you're given power by the riot, by the people. If you are an employee, you're given power by your employer. If you are a board, you're given power by the shareholders. You know, so everybody is given power. The issue is how do you use those power within the boundaries of integrity? You know, that is acceptable. So if you violate that power, then there is corruption. Then there might be money involved. For example, if you're given the power to allocate low-cost flats to the poor, then you must make sure that the criteria that you set goes to the poor. The houses goes to the poor. But if you allocate it to a rich person, or even to your own relatives who are rich, and that becomes improper, and that's corruption. Although no money has been given, all right. So basically, it's a self-serving attitude that a person have, that is to serve himself, and in many cases to serve the needs of the requirement of people close to him or her, like relatives or friends or supporters in a political situation. Yeah.
So just one last question then. Regarding now, when you were TI president, you of course dealt with MECC, you of course dealt with NKRA against corruption. Now you're a minister, you are obviously dealing with them again. How has this, can you just tell me, how do you see the work which they're doing now, compared to what you saw when you were TI president?
Okay, I think that it's important that when I now come into government, I got the NKRA, that I have to meet the needs of the requirement of NKRA. And it is good for us to have NKRA because you cannot measure performance without key results area. So myself come in, I'm also a lead minister for the NKRA on anti-corruption. Okay, so a lead minister.
Oh, I see.
A lead minister.
You replaced Datin Hasri then, is it?
Yeah, in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah, in a sense. But the thing that I have within me, I suppose, being a lead minister, I have several other teams, Pemandu team, IIM team, and the NKRA team, you know. So as a lead minister, I have to coordinate all this together to make sure that all of us have a coordinated teamwork, a more coherent efforts that's been taken to tackle the issue of the NKRA issues that is being defined the NKRA, and according to the requirement of the key performance indicators that we have to meet. Yeah. So that is my role. Yeah. And I suppose the nkra, there can be different versions. So today that I have to take the nkra, I think today I'm beginning to deal with it, both some of the measures that's given to me in the past, but maybe I already have to put in new measures to make sure that the KPI are more relevant to what I just described as my mission and vision of it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dato'.
Okay, we covered quite a lot.
Yes, this is quite interesting.
Okay, I just want to tell, because social media is a big thing, and I have no problem you putting it on the YouTube, the whole interview.
Oh.
There's no problem. If that is okay with your media people, this one is okay. I have no problem because I think people need to understand corruption in depth and its implication and its dimensions. And I cannot express this by just press statement or anything. If they want, they can look at this one whole hour interview. There's no problem. I have no problem. I have no problem with that.
Okay, so okay, so do you take the short shadows? Yeah.
Okay.
Where do we want to put that, by the way? Or where we put it in? So in front of the flag, is it?
Behind the flag or?
No, in
In front of the flag.
I stand in front of the flag.
If it's behind the flag, we will just see the doctor.